a financial planner, I'm commonly asked, what is the best type of investment? That's a tough question to answer right off the bat. Before providing a financial plan, I want to know a client's entire financial picture. For example, their income, retirement goals, savings, net worth, risk tolerance, and so on. All those factors are key components to building a solid recommendation. What I want to analyze today is a strategy where over 80% of my clients invest in. That's life insurance, specifically indexed universal life. While many of you are familiar with the advantages of traditional life insurance, for example, the death benefit, asset protection, income protection, many are not familiar with the investment side of life insurance. For example, tax-free access and growth of your money, building an emergency fund, and I would say most important, performance. When I begin planning a retirement for my clients, I set out to overcome two major hurdles that every investor is faced with. I call them hurdles to success. These two hurdles are, number one, rate of return, but with minimal risk. Did you know that over 90% of the working class in America funding some type of retirement have their money in either stocks or mutual funds, which has a potential for high returns, but also has high risk? The second hurdle to success that we have to overcome is taxes. How can we pay as little taxes as possible? With that said, I would like to analyze the difference between indexed universal life insurance and qualified plans, like a 401k, IRA, and so on, and show you why over 80% of my clients choose life insurance. Hope you enjoy.
I would like to start off by quickly attacking the first hurdles to success, which is the rate of return with minimal risk. In doing this, I want to compare two investment strategies, index strategy versus stock market or mutual funds. The index strategy is where your rate of return is linked to an index. For example, the S&P 500, which is one of the most common. One of the most powerful things about indexing and the insurance companies that offer index strategies is they set a base floor rate and a ceiling cap rate. For example, 0% floor and a 15% cap. So let's use this real-life example using historical data. Let's take a look. You see here two line graphs comparing the straight S&P 500 stock market against an index strategy. Now I'm going to use an example of an index crediting method that uses the S&P 500 as a baseline. So if we look at the red line in the S&P 500 is the stock market. The blue line is, we'll call it Company X, which is a life insurance index crediting strategy using a 0% floor and a 15% cap. Again, this is actual data. In 1990, the S&P 500 had a negative 6.6% loss. The index strategy shows a 0%. As the market loses, the life insurance company guarantees the 0%. That's your floor. Let's look at the next year, 1991. The S&P 500 did a positive 26.3%. Phenomenal year. The index strategy was credited 15%. As we fast forward 20 years to present day, we notice the one thing sticks out, the volatility of the S&P 500. They had some great years, but they also had some rough years. Whereas with the index strategy, one thing you'll notice is that there are zero losses and steady and consistent gains. In fact, assuming we started with $100,000 in 1990, 20 years later, the S&P 500 stock market grew to $355,000. It's a year-over-year average of 6.22%. Assuming we started with the same $100,000 in 1990 with the index strategy, 20 years later, your money grew to $508,000. It's a year-over-year average of 8.05%. This is a difference of $153,000. You know, 1 percentage point makes a huge difference over a 20 or even 30-year period. This is why when it comes to retirement investing, most people choose the index strategy over any stock market and or mutual fund investment. So that concludes the first hurdles to success, which is the rate of return with minimal risk. Now the second and probably most important hurdle is the tax hurdle. In the next example, I want to compare how taxes work on index universal life insurance versus a qualified plan. Like, for instance, like a 401k or an IRA. Let's take a look. Let's assume our investor is a 35-year-old female saving $1,000 per month for 30 years. I want to illustrate a 7.95% growth rate for both the index universal life as well as the qualified plan. So really we're comparing apples to apples here. In the index universal life plan, the $1,000 per month, a small percentage of that goes towards the premium, or we could also say is purchasing the death benefit, and a larger percentage is going into the cash value. Now, I built this case to really optimize the death benefit and maximize the cash value, ultimately purchasing $1.4 million in death benefit. Of course, we could always purchase a higher amount of life insurance, but this example is really maximizing the tax-free cash value. So if we look ahead 30 years out, our investor retires at age 65. Notice the index universal life account has accumulated to $1,035,000. And the qualified plan has accumulated to $1,454,000. This is a big difference between a total of $419,000. Again, even though the same amount of money is going into these accounts, there is a cost for the $1.4 million in life insurance, which is purchasing the death benefit. Whereas with the qualified plan, the entire $1,000 per month is going into the principal. Now that the retiree has reached their goal successfully, they are ready to begin withdrawing retirement income. This is where taxes come into play. Based on the $1,035,000 that has accumulated in the index universal life account, the retiree can pull $122,000 tax-free every year. Whereas if we look at the qualified plan, even though the investor has accumulated $419,000 more, the taxable equivalent to the index universal life account of $122,000 would be a total of $169,000, which is taxable income. This is the biggest difference. What the assumption here is that there's a 28% income tax rate on that money. The investor in the qualified account, again, would have to withdraw 28% more to cover for taxes, which equals $169,000 per year, to really equal that same amount of tax-free of $122,000 in the index strategy. Now let's take a look at what this does to the values in each account. This is a powerful example of how taxes can impact your retirement savings. Let's assume the investor lives another 20 years and passes at the age of 85. In the index strategy, the investor is able to pull $122,000 tax-free every year for 20 years, a total of $2.4 million tax-free. Upon the investor's death, they were also able to leave $890,000 tax-free to their beneficiaries. So if we look at the initial investment, a total of $360,000 over a 30-year period, the return on that investment was over $3.3 million, literally almost 10 times their initial investment. Now let's take a look at the qualified plan. With all the assumptions remaining the same, as a result of having to pull out 28% more money per year in income tax, the retiree begins withdrawing $169,000 per year. But take a look at this. The income in the qualified account runs out after 13 years. That's right, the $1.45 million that was accumulated in the qualified account, it's gone. And they left nothing to their beneficiaries. So if we look at the initial investment of $360,000, the net return on the investment was almost $1.6 million, literally about 4.4 times the return on their initial investment.
Thanks for watching. I hope this video adequately compared the investment hurdles to success. Please contact me for a free financial consultation and/or if you had any questions or comments related to this video. Thanks.